Beneath the pale sky of northeastern Utah lies a stretch of desert that hums with silence so heavy it feels alive. Locals call it the Uinta Basin, a place where the earth seems to remember too much. The land is beautiful in its stillness, dusty hills, sparse brush, and that endless horizon of rust-colored stone. Yet those who live nearby know better than to linger too long. They whisper of strange lights that drift across the night, of voices carried on the wind that sound almost human, almost. The ranch at the center of it all was purchased by the Sherman family in the mid-1990s, hoping for peace and isolation. What they found instead was something watching. On their first evening, as the sun slipped behind the mesas, they saw a wolf, massive, almost prehistoric, emerge from the tree line. Its fur shimmered in the dying light, eyes glowing like twin embers. It walked calmly toward them, unafraid, too large to be real. When it finally lunged at a calf, Tom Sherman fired his rifle at point-blank range. The bullets tore through its flesh, yet the creature didn't fall. It turned its head slowly toward him, eyes burning brighter, before it vanished into the brush without leaving a single drop of blood. From that night on, the family began hearing the whispers, low murmurs in the dark fields, conversations that stopped when anyone drew near. The land, it seemed, was trying to speak. After that first encounter, the Shermans began to sense a pattern in the silence, as if the ranch itself inhaled and exhaled in rhythm with their fear. Every sound felt amplified: the crunch of boots on gravel, the distant cry of coyotes that didn't sound quite right. There were nights when the wind carried faint laughter, brittle and hollow, fading before they could locate its source. Tom tried to convince himself it was just the mind playing tricks in isolation. But the animals knew better. The family's dogs, 3 large shepherds, began refusing to step foot near the pastures after dark. They would sit on the porch, ears pinned back, eyes fixed on the tree line, whimpering at nothing visible. When dawn came, they would be exhausted, as though they'd been running all night. Then came the footprints. Enormous prints pressed into the soft soil behind the barn, 6-toed deep, far too wide for any known animal. Tom followed them until they simply stopped in the middle of an open field, as if whatever left them had taken flight. The whispers grew louder that week. At first, they came from the edge of the property, indistinct words that vanished when approached. But soon they were closer, near the windows, outside the bedroom walls, sometimes inside the house itself. One night, while checking the locks, Tom caught a reflection in the window pane, his own face, and another behind it, something tall and formless, leaning close enough to breathe frost against the glass. By the end of that month, fear had become part of the ranch's rhythm. The family rarely spoke of it aloud, afraid that naming the thing would give it form. The whispers had begun to echo from beneath the ground itself, faint voices rising from the soil, like a buried radio signal trying to reach the surface. One evening, Tom's wife, Ellen, found a single cow standing motionless in the far pasture. Its eyes were fixed on something unseen in the tree line. When Tom approached, the air grew unnaturally still, as though every insect, every breath of wind had been snuffed out. The cow shuddered once, collapsed, and lay perfectly still. No wounds, no sound, just the smell of iron in the air and the echo of footsteps retreating across the dirt that night. They heard scratching along the roof, deliberate, heavy, pacing from one end to the other. Tom rushed outside with his flashlight, but the beam caught nothing except swirling dust and the dull glow of the stars. Yet, when he returned inside, muddy handprints streaked the ceiling, each print too large to belong to any human being. The family knew the land was no longer theirs. Something ancient, something unseen, had claimed it long before they came. The Entei Basin was awake, and it was listening. In the weeks that followed, the ranch grew stranger, not at night, but in the hours of full sunlight. Tom had always thought that daylight meant safety, but Skinwalker Ranch obeyed no such rules. It was in broad daylight that the shadows began to move. One afternoon, as Tom and his son were mending a fence along the western pasture, they noticed the light dim, not as if clouds had rolled in, but as though something vast had passed between them and the sun. When they looked up, the sky was empty. The cattle had gone still again, heads lifted, staring at nothing. Then, from the far edge of the field, a shadow slid across the grass, the silhouette of a figure walking, long-limbed and human-shaped, but there was no one there to cast it. The shadow passed them, the grass bending under invisible weight. It brushed against Tom's boot, leaving a streak of cold that numbed his foot to the bone. His son dropped his tools and ran for the house, crying that something was watching from the sunlight. Tom turned, and for just a second saw it too, a shimmer like heat haze, moving upright along the fence line. It vanished when he blinked, but the shadow remained by evening. Strange circles had appeared in the soil where the figure had passed. The grass had been pressed flat in perfect spirals, each one turning counterclockwise, as though the earth had been stirred by unseen hands. The phenomenon grew bolder as the days passed. The sunlight itself seemed to thicken, bending strangely when the shadows appeared. Tom began to feel watched, even as he worked in the open, his every motion measured by unseen eyes. Tools went missing, only to return hours later, laid neatly in places no one remembered setting them down. Ellen reported seeing glimmers near the house, patches of air that rippled like water, reflecting fragments of faces and flashes of motion that didn't belong to this world. One afternoon, their neighbor Ed drove by and found the Shermans standing motionless in the field, staring into nothing. Later, when asked what they had seen, neither could describe it, only that it had been tall and wrong, and that it seemed aware of their fear. That night, Ed's dogs refused to go outside, howling until dawn as if they sensed something moving along the fence lines. Tom set up cameras, hoping to catch the source of the shadows. The footage the next morning showed nothing until the final frame. Just before the tape cut to static, a single image flickered, a dark, elongated figure standing in the middle of the pasture, staring straight toward the camera. Its limbs were impossibly thin, the head too small, the proportions distorted like a stretched reflection in water. When the family returned to the field, they found the grass flattened in another perfect spiral, still warm to the touch. By the end of summer, sunlight had become their greatest enemy. The family could no longer predict when the shadows would appear. Some days passed without incident, giving them a false sense of calm. Then, without warning, the air would shift, and daylight itself would seem to darken around the ranch, a sudden, suffocating dimness that brought with it a strange, electric hum. It happened again one late afternoon. Tom was feeding the cattle when he felt it, that pressure in the chest, as though the atmosphere had thickened. The cows stopped chewing and turned toward the horizon in unison. From the field rose a column of distortion, twisting the sunlight into spirals. Within it, a human silhouette flickered in and out of existence, a walking figure made of light and shadow. its outline fracturing like a broken mirror. Tom shouted, but his voice came out muffled, like speaking underwater. The figure raised one elongated arm, and in that instant, a blinding flash erupted across the sky. Every piece of metal on the ranch, the gates, tools, even the barbed wire, began vibrating violently. Then, silence. When the light faded, the figure was gone. In its place lay another circle burned into the ground. The soil fused into glass. The cattle refused to enter that area again. For weeks afterward, the family found their watches, radios, and even car engines malfunctioning. The shadows had left, but the sunlight over the ranch never felt warm again. The ranch's strangest story, the one that first made headlines, began with a sound too, heavy to belong to any normal predator. It was late autumn, the air sharp and thin, when Tom heard the low, deliberate crunch of footsteps outside the corral. The sky had turned a washed-out grey, the kind that swallowed shadows. When he looked up, he saw it again, the same enormous wolf they'd first encountered months earlier, standing at the gate as if it had never left. It was closer this time, its fur matted with dust. Its size impossible, easily 3 times larger than any wolf in North America. Its eyes reflected a dull, almost human intelligence. The cattle shuffled nervously in their pens, snorting in alarm. Tom reached for his rifle, but before he could aim, the beast lunged at a calf, jaws clamping down with a force that cracked bone. Tom fired once, twice, 3 times. The bullets struck flesh. He saw them hit, yet there was no blood, no wound. The creature merely turned its head and stared at him, the smell of wet fur and rot thick in the air. Ellen joined him, handing over a heavier weapon, and they fired again at point-blank range. The wolf stepped backward, calm and deliberate, still holding the calf in its jaws. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it released the animal and trotted away into the scrubland, vanishing into thin air like smoke caught in wind. The calf's wound was clean, the meat cold to the touch, as if it had been dead for hours. After the creature vanished, Tom refused to believe what his own eyes had seen. He scoured the muddy ground for tracks, for any sign that the animal had fled into the woods. The footprints were there, large, deep, perfectly defined, but they ended abruptly only 30 feet from the corral, as though the wolf had lifted straight off the earth. The Shermans tried to convince themselves it had been a trick of adrenaline, but 2 nights later it returned. This time, it stood outside their window, watching. The light from the porch lantern caught its fur, shimmering, translucent, like smoke caught in glass. Its eyes were no longer amber. They burned blue-white, the color of winter lightning. Tom's dogs began barking wildly, their hackles raised. He opened the door and stepped out, rifle in hand. The wolf didn't move. It simply stared, head tilted slightly, expression unreadable. Then, without warning, it turned and began walking toward the field, not running, not fleeing, just walking, as though it wanted to be followed. Against his better judgment, Tom gave chase. He could see it between the fence posts, always just far enough away to stay out of clear sight. When he finally reached the far end of the pasture, the creature stopped beside the tree line and turned back toward him. For the briefest moment, he saw its face shift, not into something animal, but human. Then it blinked out, leaving only a smell of ozone and the sound of distant laughter rolling through the dark. The following morning, Tom found the pasture in disarray. The soil was torn up as though something massive had circled the corral through the night. The dogs were missing. Their chains lay snapped cleanly, not broken by force, but cut edges smooth, almost melted. Ellen found one of their collars hanging from the fence post, twisted into a shape that looked disturbingly deliberate. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge, a stench drifted in from the field, burned hair and decay. Tom followed it to the tree line, where he found them, the dogs, or what remained of them, lying in 3 perfect circles of scorched earth. There were no footprints leading in or out, no signs of struggle, only the faint hiss of cooling ground and that impossible odor, like ozone after a lightning strike. Tom buried them at sunrise and swore to leave the ranch, but Ellen convinced him to wait. "We can't run from something that knows where we are," she said quietly. "It'll follow." For the next few nights, the wolf did not return. But the cattle grew restless again. They refused to feed, keeping their heads low, ears twitching toward the open plains. On the 4th night, Tom stepped outside and saw 2 glowing eyes on the horizon, unmoving, steady, waiting. They were too far to be from any animal, yet bright enough to reflect off the metal gate. The wolf was gone, perhaps, but something else had taken its place. It began with a hum, a low, vibrating murmur that seemed to come from the earth itself. Tom first noticed it when the lanterns flickered, their flames pulling sideways as if drawn towards something invisible beyond the window. Ellen thought it was thunder, distant, rolling, but there were no clouds in the sky, only the stars and a strange glow spreading across the eastern ridge. The light wasn't like lightning. It pulsed soft at first, then brighter, a cold, unnatural blue that washed over the pasture like moonlight through water. The cattle stirred restlessly, pressing against the fences. A horse screamed from the stables. Tom grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The air was heavy, charged humming through the metal barrel in his hands. The light flickered again, this time closer, sweeping over the field like a slow-moving wave. The grass shimmered silver, and then he saw them. 3 spheres of blue light hovering above the northern ridge, drifting in silence. They moved as if connected, one darting ahead, the others following, their paths smooth and deliberate. When Tom raised his rifle, the light stopped. The hum deepened, pressing into his chest. Then, without warning, the lights collapsed inward, vanishing with a crack that rattled the windows. The animals went wild. In the chaos, Tom noticed something else. A smell, metallic and sharp, like burned copper. He turned toward the stables, but Ellen's scream stopped him cold. She was pointing at the ground where their shadow had been moments ago. There was nothing there, just a faint, glowing outline of 2 silhouettes burned into the dirt, as if they had stood in the blast of something beyond this world. By sunrise, the glow was gone, but the silence that followed was worse than the light. Even the wind seemed to have vanished. Tom walked the field where the blue light had hovered, the soil beneath his boots dry and brittle, as though the earth itself had been scorched from within. At the center of the field was the mark, a perfect circle, 40 feet across, pressed into the dirt with a precision no plow or tire could manage. The ground was fused into a glass-like surface, dark, smooth, and cold. It wasn't burned. It was changed. Ellen ran her fingers along it, flinching at how it hummed faintly under her touch, like a heartbeat trapped beneath the soil. When the neighbors came to see, they stood quietly, unsure what to make of it. One of them, a rancher named Rowe, spat and muttered, "This ain't man-made." Another crossed himself and turned away. Tom fetched his camera and took several photos. But when he developed the film that evening, the images came out black, every single one. Ellen, shaken, tried to pray, but her voice trembled, breaking halfway through. That night she dreamt of standing in the circle again, only now it wasn't dark. Something was glowing beneath the surface, shifting, writhing, alive. By morning, the circle was gone. Not filled, not erased, simply gone. The soil was soft again, untouched, as though nothing had ever been there. But on the back porch railing, carved deep into the wood, were 3 perfectly straight lines. They hadn't been there the night before. The nights that followed were filled with whispers. At first, Tom thought it was the wind, soft currents brushing through the dry grass. But when the breeze stopped and the murmurs continued, low and rhythmic, he knew it wasn't the weather. The sound came from beneath the earth. It began near the cattle pen, where the mark had once been. Ellen would wake in the dark, hearing voices not loud, not human, but layered, like dozens of tones, rising and falling in unison. Sometimes they formed words, though she couldn't understand them. Other times, they imitated familiar sounds, the bark of their dead dogs, the laughter of a neighbor, even her own voice calling Tom's name from the yard. One night, Tom took a spade and began to dig. Ellen pleaded with him to stop, but curiosity had taken root. The deeper he went, the louder the whispers became. The soil vibrated under his hands. Then the spade struck something solid. It wasn't rock, it was metal. He brushed the dirt away and uncovered what looked like a flat, metallic surface stretching in all directions, smooth and cold. When he tapped it, the voices stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a single tone rang out high and clear, echoing through the night like a bell struck from deep below. Tom stumbled back, terrified, as the earth began to tremble. The hole collapsed, sending dust into the air. From the crater came a faint pulse of light, blue and steady, beating like a heart. Ellen screamed his name, and as he turned toward her, he saw movement at the edge of the field. Dark silhouettes rising from the grass, standing perfectly still, watching. By morning, the frost had not melted. It clung to the windows, to the grass, even to the animals, a fine crystalline sheet that shimmered in the sunlight. The air felt colder than it should have been for that time of year. When Tom touched the porch rail, he flinched. The wood burned his skin with an impossible chill. Ellen stayed inside, watching from the window as he scraped one of the glowing marks from the door. The wood hissed and smoked beneath his knife, releasing a faint smell of ozone. Beneath the glow, the symbols had seared deep into the grain, like a warning carved in fire dot. Then, just before noon, the temperature changed. The cold vanished in an instant, replaced by a dry, suffocating heat that rolled across the ranch like a wave. The cattle lowed miserably, their breath coming in sharp bursts. The metal gate warped under the sudden expansion. It was as though the land itself couldn't decide what it wanted to be, frozen or burning. Tom stumbled into the field. Dizzy from the shift, the air rippled, bending the light around him. Ellen called out, but her voice broke apart mid-air, as if swallowed by static. Then the ground began to tremble. From beneath the soil, blue flames erupted, silent, ghost-like, burning without heat. They danced in spirals, tracing invisible paths across the field before vanishing one by one. When it was over, everything was still again. The frost, the flames gone. But in the center of the field, the dirt was blackened, forming another perfect circle. And at its heart lay something new, a single footprint human-sized, pressed deep into the ground, glowing faintly with the same impossible light. That night, the ranch was utterly still. No wind, no sound. Even the insects had gone quiet. Ellen sat by the window, the lantern casting a weak pool of light over the floorboards, her eyes fixed on the field where the footprints still glowed like a dying ember. Tom hadn't spoken much since the morning. He sat with his rifle resting across his knees, staring at the door as though waiting for something he already knew would come. It began again near midnight. The hum, low, steady, vibrating through the house like a living pulse. The lanterns flickered, the air thickened, and then, all at once, the windows burst open, slamming against the walls. A freezing wind poured inside, carrying with it the faint sound of voices. They were whispering their names. Tom ran to shut the door, but before his hand could touch it, the symbols carved into the wood ignited, burning blue, bright as lightning. Ellen screamed as the house filled with light. The floorboards shook violently, the furniture sliding toward the center of the room. And then, in a blinding flash, the world went silent. When Ellen opened her eyes, the light was gone. The house was cold again, utterly dark. She called out for Tom once, twice, but there was no reply. His rifle lay by the door, still warm. Outside, the field glowed faintly, the same way it had that first night. Only now, at the center of it, stood a figure, tall, still, and shimmering faintly blue dot as she watched. It turned its head slowly toward her, and then the hum began again. The next morning, the neighbors found the ranch empty. The house was intact, the animals gone, and the fields untouched, except for one thing. Etched into the dirt, perfectly circular and glassy smooth, were two sets of footprints, side by side, leading nowhere.